Hi, friend. Welcome to Rainy Days, a quiet place for gentle stories told beneath the sound of rain. Now, let's begin tonight's story. The night the rain feels familiar begins quietly, almost shyly, as if the sky is remembering something too. He notices it the moment he unlocks the door, that soft, steady whisper against the window pane, the kind that moves in long breaths instead of hurried drops. It is the kind of rain she used to pause for, the kind she would tilt her head toward as if listening for a secret. And even before he steps fully inside the small apartment, even before he flicks on the warm lamplight, something in him knows that tonight will be different. Tonight, the rain sounds exactly like it did when she was here. The room greets him with its usual softness, the faint scent of old wood, the quiet hum of the refrigerator, the gentle amber circle cast by the lamp in the corner. Nothing extraordinary, nothing changed. Yet he feels it, that faint tug in his chest, an old thread being pulled loose, quietly, patiently. He closes the door behind him and stands still for a moment, letting the sound of the rain settle across his shoulders like a thin blanket. There are some nights when the world feels too sharp to touch, when the air, the noises, the very shape of a room can make him feel like he's brushing against old bruises. But not tonight. Tonight, everything feels softened, blurred edges, warm corners, familiar shadows. And the rain is gentle enough to carry memories without making them hurt too much. He walks deeper into the room, his steps slow, unhurried. It has been almost a year since she last sat by that window. Yet some part of him still moves as though she might be there, as though he might turn the corner and find her curled in the old armchair with her knees drawn up and her hair falling over one shoulder. He almost imagines her shape there now, a delicate silhouette outlined by the soft glow of the lamp. But of course, the chair is empty. It has been empty for a long time. Still, he draws closer to it, pulled by the kind of instinct one doesn't question. The rain outside thickens slightly, tapping in gentle patterns against the glass, and he feels a quiet hum rise in his chest. He remembers this sound, not just as background noise, but as something woven into the fabric of evenings they once shared, evenings of soft-spoken conversations, half-finished thoughts, quiet smiles that felt bigger than words. He moves a hand along the back of the armchair. The fabric has grown a little warm, softened by use and time, but it feels almost unchanged beneath his fingertips. She used to sit here every evening, always this chair, always this angle toward the window. She said the light hit differently from here. She said the rain felt closer. She said this spot made the whole world seem calmer, like a slow breath after a long day. He didn't always understand it then, but tonight he thinks he does. He can almost picture her leaning forward, elbows on knees, watching the droplets race each other down the glass. She used to narrate them under her breath. "That one will win," she'd whisper, even though the concept of winning meant nothing at all. It was the kind of small, tender silliness that made the days feel lighter. He had laughed back then, not because the comment was funny, but because it was hers. He sits down slowly, letting his weight settle into the cushion. It gives beneath him, familiar, shaped by years of quiet evenings. The lamplight glows softly on the table beside him, reflecting off the empty porcelain saucer. He had washed the teacup earlier in the day, but sometimes he leaves the saucer there without thinking, a small habit he hasn't unlearned yet. Or maybe a habit he doesn't want to unlearn. The room is dim except for the circle of warm light around him. Outside, the rain deepens into a steady rhythm, a calm, patient fall that seems to say, it's okay to remember. And he does. He lets the memories drift toward him, gentle as the sound of water sliding down glass. He remembers the way she would tuck her feet beneath her and wrap a blanket around her shoulders. The way she would hold her cup with both hands, as if warming herself from the inside. the way she hummed without realizing it, a soft, wandering tune that had no shape, no beginning, no end. He used to tease her gently about it, and she would pretend to be embarrassed before continuing to hum anyway. Sometimes, when the night was especially quiet, she would speak in that low, thoughtful voice she only used in calm moments. She would tell him about the stories she imagined behind each raindrop, the ones that slid straight down like determined travelers, the ones that zigzagged like they couldn't decide who to be, the tiny ones that clung to the glass as if afraid to fall. He remembers thinking she could make even the rain feel alive. He leans back slightly, closing his eyes. He had almost forgotten what it felt like to let the rain fill the room with its scent, that faint, earthy coolness that sneaks through the cracks of an old window frame. Mixed with the warm smell of the lamp's heat on metal, the room feels balanced, as if the air itself is trying to soothe him. When he opens his eyes, he notices something subtle. The window looks almost exactly as it did the last evening she sat here. The small streak near the top left corner where the condensation gathers. The round mark near the bottom of the glass where her thumbprint used to be when she leaned closer. It's gone now, of course, wiped away by time and cleaning cloths, but he still knows exactly where it once was. The familiarity is overwhelming, but not in a painful way. More like sitting with an old song he hasn't heard in years, one that brings him a soft kind of ache, a kind that settles, that doesn't demand anything from him except to feel. He exhales slowly. Maybe he came back to this window tonight because some part of him was ready to listen again, to the rain, to the silence, to the parts of his heart he tucked away when she left. Maybe the rain didn't change. Maybe he did. The thought lingers gently in the room, as quiet as the droplets slipping down the glass. He lets it stay as he sinks deeper into the chair, letting the sound of the night steady his breathing, letting the memories rest beside him instead of pressing on him. Outside, the rain continues, soft and familiar, as if returning to the same place, just like he did. The window where she once sat holds a quiet kind of gravity, the kind that draws him in without ever asking. Even now, as he sits in her old chair, he can feel the shape of her presence in the room. Not like a ghost, not like a shadow, but like a memory settling gently beside him, breathing slow and soft. The rain has always known how to blur the line between past and present, and tonight it feels especially good at it. He leans forward a little, resting his elbows on his knees the way she used to. From this angle, the world outside the glass feels closer, as if the window isn't a barrier but a bridge. He finally understands why she loved this spot so much. The view itself isn't remarkable, just the narrow street below, the dim glow of shop signs reflecting on wet pavement, the silhouettes of trees swaying in the wind. But everything looks different through this window, softer, more deliberate, as if the world knows it's being watched and decides to move more kindly because of it. The thin white curtain beside him flutters, slightly with a breeze sneaking in through the imperfect frame. She used to tease the window for being too honest, always letting a bit of the outside in. She said it was the house's way of reminding them they were part of something larger than their worries. He always rolled his eyes playfully, pretending not to understand, even though secretly he did. More than he ever admitted, the cushion under him still holds the slightest dip where she used to sit. It isn't something he notices with his eyes, only with his body, a familiarity in the way he sinks into it, the gentle way the fabric gives. Over time, the chair molded itself to her shape, her posture, her quiet rituals. Now, sitting here feels like leaning into an old photograph without looking at it. The room carries her too, in small and almost invisible ways. On the wooden side table sits the lamp she insisted on taking from a thrift store they found on an unexpected walk. It cost next to nothing, but she said it had a warm soul, the kind of light that made a room feel like home. When he turns it on now, it casts the same soft glow across the wall, pooling golden warmth around the window. In that light, he imagines her shoulder catching it, her hair gathering the warmth like strands of dusk. And then there is the faint smell of jasmine tea. He didn't brew any tonight, but sometimes the scent lingers in a place long after the habit leaves. She drank jasmine tea the way other people breathe, naturally, without thought. He can almost picture her fingers curled loosely around the cup, the steam touching her face as she watched the rain trace quiet lines down the glass. She liked to say jasmine smelled, like calm evenings and second chances. He wonders now if she meant it the way he thinks. She did. His gaze drifts along the window frame. He remembers how she would slide her fingers over the cool glass, sometimes tracing invisible shapes. Once, he asked her what she was drawing. She smiled and said, "Just stories that don't know their words yet." He didn't quite understand then, but tonight, it makes sense. Some feelings were never meant to be spoken out loud. Some memories were always meant to be felt, not explained. He shifts slightly in the chair, and the cushion rustles softly, releasing a small breath of air, an exhale that seems to fill the space she left behind. The rain thickens outside, tapping its delicate music. The streetlights blur into long silver streaks on the wet road, and the whole world beyond the window looks like a watercolor someone forgot to finish. She used to love nights like this. He remembers her saying that rainy evenings made her feel suspended in time, like everything slowed down just enough to catch her breath. Maybe that was why she always returned to this window. Maybe watching the rain fall through this glass made her feel whole, in a way nothing else could. He wonders if she ever knew that watching her watch the rain made him feel whole too. The memory surfaces without sharpness, without pain, just a soft ache, the kind that reminds him of something once precious. He breathes it in slowly and lets it settle in his chest like warm tea spreading through him. The window is more than glass and wood and old hinges. It's a keeper of evenings they shared, of whispered thoughts between the hum of the rain, of quiet rhythms that shaped the little universe the two of them once built. He lets his fingertips trail along the armrest. The fabric is worn smooth in places from years of her hands resting there. He used to joke that she could make anything feel softer just by touching it. She laughed at that, but he wasn't joking. Outside, a car splashes through a shallow puddle, sending ripples of sound through the night. It fades quickly, swallowed by the steady rain. The apartment seems to lean into the quiet again, inviting him to linger, inviting him to remember without hurting. He pulls the blanket draped over the side of the chair onto his lap. It's the one she used on colder nights, woven in muted blues and grays, colors that reminded her of foggy mornings. He wraps it loosely around himself, feeling a ghost of the warmth she once left in its threads. The rain shifts again, gentler now, slower, as if mimicking the soft rhythm of her breathing when she would drift between wakefulness and dreams. He closes his eyes briefly, letting the sound wash over him. The window where she once sat is not just a place. It is a memory folded into the shape of a room. It is a moment held open by the rain. It is a reminder that some people leave quietly, but their presence lingers in all the places they loved, especially in the corners touched by light, by warmth, by evenings filled with soft silences. He exhales, long and slowed out the cushion, the curtain, the rain, the lamp, the leftover scent of jasmine. Each piece fits together, forming the outline of a world that once held the two of them gently. And as he sits there tonight, he realizes something quietly comforting. Sitting at this window no longer feels like reopening an old wound. It feels like holding a familiar hand, like resting inside a memory that has learned to become soft. The first evenings they shared beside the glass returned to him slowly, like pages from a book he once read too softly to leave creases. He He remembers them not in sharp detail, but in moods, the kind of memories you don't see so much as feel. They come wrapped in the scent of warm tea, the hush of rain, and the gentle awkwardness of two people learning the quiet language of being near each other. Those early nights were simple, almost shy. He hadn't known she would prefer the window as her place of choice. The first time they sat together there, it happened without planning. The rain had begun unexpectedly late in the afternoon, soft at first, and gathering into a calm, steady fall. She had wandered toward the window naturally, drawn by the sound the way some people are drawn to music. He followed without thinking, not wanting to disturb the moment, only wanting to share it. He remembers how she folded herself into the chair with the small, unconscious grace she never seemed aware of, a blanket over her legs, hair slightly damp from the earlier drizzle, strands catching the lamplight like threads of warm gold. She looked peaceful that evening, as if the rain had swept something restless out of her. He took the seat beside her, unsure if he was welcome to sit so close, but she made no protest. Instead, she simply moved her cup aside so he could place his on the table too. She didn't say anything at first. Neither did he. And somehow that silence became its own kind of beginning, gentle, unforced, like the space between two breaths. Outside, the droplets slid down the glass in long, patient trails. She watched them with a quiet concentration that made him wonder what she was thinking. After a long moment, she whispered, "Doesn't it sound like the world is breathing?" It was such an unexpected thought that he turned to look at her. But she wasn't looking at him. She was gazing out the window, eyes soft, smile barely formed. Even back then, she spoke like that, a little dreamy, a little poetic, like her mind lived half in the present and half somewhere made of warm light and quiet corners. He didn't know how to respond in that moment, so he just nodded. But she seemed to understand that his silence meant he was trying to see the world the way she did. That night, she told him something else, something that slipped from her lips so casually he almost missed its weight. She said rainy days made her feel safe, not because of the sound, but because the sky didn't expect anything from her. "On sunny days," she whispered, "I always feel like I'm supposed to be bright too. But rain lets me just be." He thought about that for days afterward. He remembers how she sipped her tea with both hands wrapped around the mug, as though she needed its warmth to anchor her to the moment. Every so often, she would say something small, a comment about the streetlight flickering, or how the rain always made the city smell like wet leaves, or a stray memory about watching storms on the old balcony of her childhood home. She never spoke loudly. Her words drifted through the room, the way the rain drifted across the glass. He listened more than he spoke, not because he didn't have thoughts, but because her voice had a softness to it that made speaking feel like interrupting a quiet song. There was one particular moment that still lives in him with surprising clarity. She had leaned forward slightly, looking at a large droplet trembling at the edge of the window frame. Just before it fell, she murmured, "The brave ones always hesitate." He had smiled at that, genuinely, warmly, and she caught the smile and returned it with one of her own, small but real, the kind that made her eyes crinkle at the corners. He didn't know it then, but that tiny shared smile would become one of the anchors of their time together. Some nights, she brought stories, little ones, unfinished ones, tales she made up about strangers on the street or about the imaginary lives of raindrops. She had a way of weaving emotion into simple things. She once told him a story about a raindrop that wanted to stay on the cloud because it was afraid of falling, and another about a street lamp waiting for someone to look up and notice its light. He teased her that she gave feelings to everything, even puddles. She laughed and told him that the world was kinder when you believed everything had a heart. Over time, He realized those evenings were teaching him something he had never learned before: how to slow down, how to let a moment be enough, how to sit in silence without needing to fill it. One of their quiet rituals began on an evening much like the others. She had been watching the droplets race down the window when she whispered, "Pick one." He looked at her, confused, as she nodded toward the glass. A droplet. Choose one and follow it. He didn't understand the purpose, but he humored her. They tracked two droplets, hers on the left, his on the right, watching them slide, merge, hesitate, and finally fall. Her droplet reached the bottom first. She celebrated softly, her laughter warm and breathy, like a gentle spark in the dim room. "Winner," she whispered, nudging him lightly with her shoulder. He didn't care that he'd lost. Not even a little. In fact, he pretended his droplet wasn't trying very hard. Just to hear her laugh again, it became their ritual. Rainy evenings meant choosing droplets to race. It was silly, but it was theirs. A tiny, joyful tradition that made the room feel alive. On another early night, she shared a memory from her childhood, how she used to sit on the floor by her grandmother's window during storms, tracing the outline of raindrops with her finger. "I think I inherited the weather," she said softly. "I feel most myself when the sky's quiet and gray." He had wanted to tell her that the room felt more like home when she was in it, but the words stayed inside him, too big for his voice at the time. She once fell asleep beside him in the chair, not fully asleep, just drifting, her head resting lightly on his shoulder. The rain had softened then, turning into a soft mist. He didn't move for a long time, afraid to wake her, content to sit there with the quiet rhythm of her breathing, mingling with the gentle tap of water on glass. In that moment, he thought, maybe this is what peace feels like. Looking back now, he realizes those early evenings weren't traumatic or grand. They didn't hinge on big declarations or life-changing moments. They were built of softness, small smiles, shared silences, cups of tea, lamplight, and the steady music of rain. But sometimes, the simplest beginnings leave the deepest prints. And as he sits in the same chair now, letting the memory settle around him, he feels grateful for every soft, shy, rain-soaked evening they ever shared. Those first tiny steps toward a quiet world the two of them once built together. How he first found her, there is a memory that arrives, not in sharp lines, but in softened light, as though the moment itself was wrapped in the hush of rain. Even now, as he sits in her old chair, listening to the gentle tap of droplets against the glass, the scene comes back to him with a quiet clarity that makes his chest tighten in a strangely tender way. It had been a stormier evening, and this one, the kind of downpour that blinds the street in, sheets of silver, and turns every passing car into a blur of light and noise. He had rushed home through it, soaked from hair to shoes, breath uneven, jacket heavy with rain. The city felt like it was collapsing into a single gray hum. All he wanted that night was warmth, light, stillness. He didn't expect to find her. He remembers opening the door, shaking water from his sleeves, and pausing, not because of something loud or obvious, but because of a feeling. The room felt different the moment he stepped inside, softer, brighter in a peculiar way, though only one lamp was on. Warmer, too, as if the air itself had been waiting for him. Then he saw her. She was curled in the armchair by the window, knees drawn up, wrapped in a blanket he didn't remember leaving out. Her hair, slightly damp from earlier drizzle, fell gently along her cheek. In her hands she held a simple mug, not with both palms the way she usually did, but loosely, as if she were warming the air around it rather than herself. The lamp behind her cast a soft halo along the edges of her silhouette, turning her into a shape that felt almost unreal. For a moment, he didn't move. He simply stood there, dripping onto the floor, caught between surprise and something he didn't have a name for yet. She looked up at him then, not startled, not apologetic, just calm, as if she had always belonged in that chair. "You're drenched," she said softly, her voice low, warm, without judgment. The kind of gentle observation that made the moment feel less chaotic, less storm-filled, as though the weather outside had softened the second she spoke. He remembers laughing quietly, a breath more than a sound. "I noticed," he replied, water sliding from his hair onto his collar. He felt strangely clumsy in front of her, aware of every drop falling from him, as if he were disturbing the stillness she had woven into the room. She set her mug down and reached for a towel on the small table beside her. He didn't know how she knew where it was. He hadn't told her, but she found it easily, as though the room had been waiting to be used by her hands. She stood and crossed the space between them, holding the towel out. He remembers how carefully she unfolded it, how she didn't push it into his hands, but offered it gently, like a small act of kindness, quiet but full. "Here," she said, "you'll catch a cold." He took the towel, fingers brushing hers just slightly. That tiny touch still lingers in his memory, warm despite her hands being cool from holding the mug, soft in a way that made something flutter unexpectedly inside him. He wiped his hair, his face, trying to laugh away the awkwardness. "I didn't expect anyone to be here," he said, and she smiled then. A small smile, one that softened her eyes and made the room feel even warmer. "I'm sorry," she murmured. "The rain started earlier than I thought. I saw the window and I guess I just sat down." She wasn't apologizing for being there. She was apologizing for occupying a space that felt intimate, but it didn't feel intrusive at all. If anything, seeing her there made the room feel more like home than it ever had in all the years before. He remembers stepping closer, still drying his sleeves. "You like watching the rain, don't you?" he asked lightly. She nodded, but slowly, as though the truth of that nod held a weight she didn't often share. "It's the only time the world feels quiet enough to hear my thoughts," she said. Didn't know then how deeply that sentence would stay with him, how it would replay itself in his mind on lonely nights, how it would return to him even now, sitting in the same chair she once curled into. He took a few steps toward the window, curious about what she saw from that angle. When he reached her side, he understood. The street outside looked washed clean, the lamplight trembling in puddles, reflections stretching across wet pavement like golden threads pulled loose from somewhere. The rain traced long, gentle paths down the glass, and for a moment, standing beside her, everything truly did feel quieter. She studied his face then, as if she could read his thoughts without him saying a word. "You've never sat at this window, have you?" she asked softly. He shook his head. "Not really." She gestured toward the chair, her smile growing just a little. "You should try it sometime. It makes the rain feel different." And on that night, still soaked, still catching his breath, he believed her. She moved back into the chair, curling up again as though she were made for that spot. He sat down beside her on the edge of the windowsill, feeling both too close and not close enough. For a long time, they didn't speak. They just sat there, listening. The storm outside softened gradually, shifting from a heavy downpour to a rhythmic, soothing patter. The city lights blurred into long streaks of color. The window fogged slightly from the warmth of their quiet breathing dot at some point. She whispered, "This is my favorite kind of rain." Her voice was like a thread woven into the sound of the water outside. He glanced at her, watching the soft expression on her face, and asked, "Why this kind?" She thought for a moment and replied, "Because it feels like the sky is remembering something." He didn't know what she meant. Not then, but tonight, sitting in her chair with the same soft rain brushing the window. He finally does dot her presence that night changed everything. Not because of a dramatic confession or a grand event, but because of something small, warm, and gentle. The way she fit into the room, the way she fit into the rain, the way she fit into a space he hadn't realized was empty. That was the night the window stopped being just a window. It became a place where something began. A quiet beginning shaped by lamplight, warm towels, soft voices, and a sky that seemed to understand them both. Rainy rituals and quiet shared worlds began with small, almost accidental habits, the kind that form when two people sit together often enough, gently enough that the space between them learns their rhythm before they do. He didn't realize they were building rituals at the time. It all felt natural, unintentional, like breathing. Only later would he understand how these tiny routines had stitched themselves into the fabric of his days. It always started with 2 cups of tea. He used to drink whatever was on hand. Black tea, green tea, sometimes even old leftover bags he forgot to throw away. But once she came into his life, jasmine tea became their unspoken default. She said jasmine tasted like a memory that hasn't happened yet, which made no sense to him then, but he bought boxes of it anyway. She prepared the tea most evenings, warming the mugs with hot water first, humming lightly as the steam curled around her fingers. He sometimes stood behind her just to listen to that humming, soft, simple, steady, like the prelude to the rain outside. They never rushed the pouring. She liked to let the tea steep slowly, watching the water darken, the petals swirl. He would tease her for treating it like a ceremony, but secretly he found comfort in the slowness. There was peace in the way she moved, in the care she took with small things. Then they would carry their mugs to the window, placing them on the wooden side tables she had claimed as the tea altar. It wasn't really an altar, just a worn surface with 2 small coasters and a faint ring where the lacquer had faded. But to her, it was the center of their quiet universe, the place where warm cups, warm hands, and warm evenings met. After the tea came the blanket ritual. She always brought one, even when the weather wasn't cold. She said blankets made conversation softer, and he learned quickly that she was right. There was something intimate about sharing a blanket, not romantic at first, but comforting, like sitting inside the same small warmth. Sometimes she wrapped it only around her legs. Sometimes she pulled it across both of them without asking, assuming he wouldn't mind. He never did. That blanket, blue and gray with tiny frayed edges, still lies folded beside the chair now. Their conversations during those early rituals were simple. She talked about her childhood, about the tree outside her grandmother's home that always looked like it was listening. She talked about the books she never finished, the notebooks filled with half-drawn sketches and lines of poetry. She talked about the way the rain seemed to erase the noise in her head, leaving only thoughts that felt honest. He talked less, but she never pushed. When he did speak, she listened with a stillness he'd never encountered before, the kind where you could tell she wasn't waiting for her turn to talk. She was simply there, holding his words gently, like small, fragile things. Over time, the rituals deepened. The room itself grew accustomed to their presence. The lamp always dimmed to the same level. The chairs always faced the window at the same angle. The rain became the third voice in their conversations, steady, patient, never interrupting. Sometimes the storms outside were loud enough to drown their words. And on those nights, they would sit without speaking at all, letting silence grow soft between them. One of their favorite rituals was the childhood story exchange. She would tell a memory, then he would answer with one of his own. Hers were whimsical, making boats from leaves, climbing trees she was too small to climb, drawing suns on foggy windows. His were plainer, school quarters, quiet breakfasts, afternoons spent alone with books. She once told him his stories felt like rooms with the door just slightly open. He didn't understand at first, but over time, he saw what she meant. His memories were careful, reserved, a little shy. But she liked them anyway. Not another ritual. One that still tightened something warm in his chest was the rain naming game. Whenever the weather changed, she would give the rain a name. Soft rain was whisper rain. Heavy rain was laundry rain, because she said it always fell on days she washed clothes. Fast rain was runaway rain. The misty drizzle in early mornings she called half-awake rain. He pretended to be amused, but secretly he enjoyed waiting for her new names each evening. It made the sky feel like a character in their life. Sometimes they created quiet worlds inside small moments. She would point at a couple walking under an umbrella and invent a story about them. He'd join in, adding details, guessing their jobs, their plans, the names of their imaginary pets. They once spent an entire evening following the journey of a stray cat, weaving between cars, narrating its heroic quest as if it were a traveler seeking shelter in a rain-soaked kingdom. It was silly, childlike, but it made the apartment feel alive. There were nights when she wrote in her notebook while sitting beside him. He never asked what she was writing. Poems, thoughts, fragments of stories. She never offered to show him, and he never asked her to. It was enough to know she trusted him to sit beside her while she created her quiet worlds. One ritual surprised him. The way she would pause mid-conversation whenever a certain pattern of rain appeared. A soft, irregular tapping that sounded like fingertips on glass. She said that rhythm made her feel like the rain was knocking politely, asking to be let in. And every time it happened, she would turn toward him with the same small, contented smile. He began to listen for that pattern too. There was also the ritual of endings. Not goodbye, just endings. When the evening grew late, she would always close the night the same way, by touching the window lightly with her fingertips. A small gesture, reverent, as though thanking the rain for its company. She once said rain-filled evenings felt like pages of her life gently turning themselves. He didn't think much of it then. But now, watching the droplets slide down the glass, he could almost see the imprint of her fingers there dot. As these rituals grew, so did something else, a quiet sense of belonging. Not the loud, overwhelming kind. The gentle kind that slips into a room unnoticed and makes itself at home. They never discussed what they were to each other. They didn't need to. The rituals spoke for them, not 2 cups of tea, 1 blanket, the rain, the window, their shared, quiet worlds. He didn't know it at the time, but those simple evenings were shaping him, teaching him, softening corners he didn't realize had grown sharp dot. And now, sitting alone in the chair where she once curled up, he feels those rituals gently return, not as pain, but as the warm echo of something once deeply cherished dot. The silence growing between soft words came slowly, so gradually that neither of them noticed at first. It wasn't a sudden shift, not a sharp break, but a gentle widening of space, like 2 chairs that inch apart without anyone deliberately moving them. Looking back now, he realizes how quietly it happened, how almost tenderly the distance settled in, wrapped in the same rain that once held them so close dot in those days. The rain still came every evening. The window was still their place. The lamp still glowed warm and low, casting soft gold on the curtain. Their cups still steamed with jasmine tea, and she still hummed under her breath, though perhaps a little less often. If he had been paying closer attention, he might have noticed that her humming grew softer, or that she paused more frequently before speaking, or that her thoughts drifted somewhere he could not follow. But they were both gentle people, quiet by nature, and quiet people sometimes confuse silence with peace. It began with pauses. She would say something about a dream she had, or a memory stirred by the scent of rain. and he would respond just a little too slowly. His mind preoccupied with work, responsibilities, or simply the heaviness he carried without naming. She would smile anyway, forgiving him without words. Then she began to trail off mid-sentence, letting her voice dissolve into the soft tapping of the rain. He thought she was simply tired. He didn't realize she was beginning to feel unheard. The seating changed too. Not visibly, not enough for anyone else to notice. But he did, now that he remembers. She used to curl close, her blanket brushing against his knee. Over time, her blanket stayed neatly wrapped around only herself. Her chair angled just slightly away from his. She didn't lean into him when the thunder cracked. She didn't seek his gaze as often when she laughed. But these were tiny things, featherlight shifts that barely made a sound as they fell into place. The rain-naming game faded first. One evening, she watched the droplets streak down the glass with the same longing softness in her eyes. But when he asked, "What do you call this kind of rain?" she only smiled faintly and said, "Just rain." He didn't ask again. The blanket ritual followed. She still brought it to the window, still sat with it draped around her, but she no longer pulled it over, both of them without thinking. It stayed folded over her legs, forming a small border he didn't understand at the time. He didn't know that she wrapped herself tightly, not because she was cold, but because she was trying to keep pieces of herself from slipping through the cracks. Even the tea ritual changed. She used to steep both cups, humming quietly, handing his mug to him with both hands. Later, she simply placed his cup on the table without announcing it. Once, he forgot to drink it until it went cold. She didn't mention it, but her eyes lingered on the untouched tea longer than he realized. Their worlds, the small, imagined stories about strangers walking under umbrellas, became harder to build. He would point at someone and say, "What do you think his story is?" And she would smile, tired at the corners. "I don't know," she would murmur. "Maybe I'm not very good at stories these days." He hadn't known that her stories didn't disappear. They simply had nowhere to go. She still thought in stories. She just didn't know if he wanted to hear them anymore. And then there were the evenings when she didn't talk at all. Not out of anger, but out of a quiet sadness she didn't know how to name. She looked out the window, watching the droplets trail down the glass as though waiting for answers, waiting for something to land softly inside her. He sat beside her, sensing something was wrong, but unsure how to reach through the silence. One night, the rain fell in long, thin lines, nearly soundless. She sat with her chin resting on her knees, blanket wrapped tightly around her. He glanced at her and said, "Long day?" She nodded, but didn't elaborate. He wanted to ask more, to lean closer, to touch her hand, to say, "Talk to me." But the words felt too heavy, too clumsy. So he remained quiet, and she remained unseen. That was how the silence grew, little moments when one of them hesitated and the other didn't bridge the gap. Little hurts that went unspoken. Little needs left unmet, not out of carelessness, but out of fear of burdening, fear of misunderstanding, fear of breaking the gentle world they had built. It wasn't coldness. It wasn't anger. They didn't fight. They didn't argue. Their silence wasn't sharp. It was soft. Too soft. The kind of silence that settles like mist, unnoticed until everything feels slightly out of focus. She still watched the rain, but her eyes seemed to be searching for something beyond it. Something distant. Something he didn't know how to offer. He remembers one evening vividly now. The rain was light, barely more than a whisper, and she sat unusually still. He asked gently, "Are you okay?" She didn't answer at first. Her fingers traced an invisible circle on her mug, slowly, thoughtfully. When she finally spoke, her voice was too quiet for the room. "I just feel like I'm drifting," she whispered. He should have asked what she meant. He should have placed his hand over hers. He should have said, "You're not drifting. I'm right here." But he froze, uncertain and afraid of saying the wrong thing. So he said nothing, and her eyes lowered, and the silence grew just a little wider. He sits now in the same chair, listening to the rain, realizing how many moments he misread, how many tiny signals slipped past him, gentle pleas disguised as small hesitations. How two people can sit inches apart, but feel miles away without ever raising their voices. But even as the distance grew, she stayed. She stayed beside him at the window. She stayed in the rituals. She stayed in the soft lamplight, the blanket, the jasmine tea, the chair that still remembers the shape of her dot. Sometimes love doesn't vanish all at once. Sometimes it grows quiet. Sometimes it waits. Sometimes it becomes a silence full of words that neither person knows how to speak. And tonight, listening to the rain, he finally hears those unspoken words. They sound a lot like the spaces between raindrops, soft, lonely, and full of things that were never meant to be. Lost, the last night her chair was warm, is a memory he carries like a fragile photograph. Edges softened by time, colors muted, but the feeling still intact, still pulsing quietly in the center of him. He doesn't revisit it often. It is a memory that asks to be handled gently, as if it might crumble if held too tightly. But tonight, with the rain rushing against the window in the same slow rhythm as that night long ago, the memory rises on its own dot. It had been an evening with no storms, no dramatic sky, just a long, slow drizzle that began in the late afternoon and never quite stopped. The kind of rain that feels like it's trying not to disturb anyone. Soft, hesitant, almost polite. If he had known what the night would become, maybe he would have paid more attention to the weather. Maybe he would have marked the exact sound of the droplets as they slipped down the window, or the way the light pooled on the floor, or the way her voice trembled just slightly when she said hello. She was already seated in the chair when he came home, the blue and gray blanket draped around her legs, a half-finished cup of jasmine tea on the table. Something about the scene felt prepared, as if she had arranged it carefully, thoughtfully, like someone setting a table before an important meal. He greeted her softly, as he always did, and she greeted him back with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. But it was still warm, still gentle, still hers. He didn't notice the suitcase at first, not it sat quietly by the door, half hidden in the dim corner where the lamplight faded. Not an open suitcase, not a chaotic one, but a neatly zipped one. Calm, silent, patient, much like she had been for weeks. He didn't see it until he went to hang his coat, and even then, he stared at it for a long moment before his mind understood what it meant. Not because he was shocked, but because he didn't want to believe something so simple, so ordinary in appearance, could hold such a heavy truth. When he finally looked back at her, she was watching him, not guilty, not afraid, but with a fragile softness, as if bracing herself for the sound of something breaking. He walked back to the window, not trusting his voice. She didn't speak either. The rain filled the silence between them, tapping in long, delicate strokes. It was the sound of something ending gently. Was this the plan? He asked eventually, quietly. She lowered her gaze to her mug. Not the plan, she murmured. Just the truth. He sat in the chair beside hers, the chair she once pulled close, the one that slowly drifted an inch too far away. Tonight, even that small distance feels like a canyon. How long have you known? He asked. She ran a finger along the rim of the cup. A while, she whispered. Longer than I wanted to admit. The window fogged lightly from the warmth of the room, and he watched the condensation gather, drip, and fall, the same way he had watched it so many nights before. But tonight, Each droplet felt heavier. Did I do something wrong? He asked. His voice wasn't accusing. It was tired, quiet, like someone asking a sincere question in the dark. She shook her head immediately. No, you didn't do anything wrong. But there was a pause. A soft, painful one. And in that space, he felt the truth settle. You just didn't do enough, she finished gently. And I didn't know how to say that without hurting you. She wasn't blaming. She wasn't cruel. She wasn't listing grievances or retelling past disappointments. She was simply honest. And he realized then that her honesty had been waiting at the edge of their silences for months. She continued, voice softer than the rain. I felt myself disappearing a little, every day, and I didn't want to vanish in front of someone I care about. He closed his eyes briefly. Her words were not sharp. They were tender, almost apologetic, but they still pressed against him with a weight he couldn't ignore. He wanted to reach for her hand. He wanted to pull her close. He wanted to say all the things he should have said long ago, all the small reassurances and honest confessions and quiet promises. He wanted to fix what had been unraveling thread by thread, but he knew. Deep down, he knew. Some endings are not decisions. They are conclusions. She placed her cup on the table. The soft clink of ceramic was far too gentle for the moment. Then she pulled the blanket tighter around herself, as if preparing to step away from the warmth they once shared. I'm sorry, she whispered. He shook his head slowly. Don't be. Because what else could he say? Because apologies don't change the shape of a goodbye. Because love, when spoken too late, can only bow its head. She stood, and the cushion beneath her rose slightly, releasing the warmth she had left behind. He stared at the faint, shallow impression her body had made, an imprint that would fade in minutes, but would echo in him much longer. Before she opened the door, she turned back. Her eyes glistened in the soft lamplight, not with tears, but with something quieter, a tenderness still intact, even in the leaving. I loved this window, she said. Even when I felt alone, it still felt like home. And then she added, almost as an afterthought, you did too once. He swallowed, unable to reply. She stepped out into the hallway. The door closed without a slam, just a soft click. Final in its gentleness, the apartment fell still. The rain continued, and the chair where she had sat remained warm for a long, aching moment, warm enough to feel like she might return, but fading slowly, softly, inevitably. He didn't sit in it that night. He couldn't. He stood by the window instead, watching the rain in a way he never had before, as if trying to understand why something so constant, so soothing, could not keep two people from drifting apart. It would be months before he dared sit in her chair again. Tonight, he sits here with the rain outside and the faint echo of that fading warmth. Not sharp now, not painful, just something quietly woven into him. A warmth that once meant presence. A warmth that taught him how softly someone can leave. After she left, the window waited. He didn't notice it at first. How the apartment held its breath. How the chair sat unmoved. How the rain still tapped gently against the glass, as if expecting her silhouette to appear there again. He didn't realize for weeks that the window had become something like a witness. Quiet, patient, unchanging, watching the space she left behind Dot in the days after she walked out with her suitcase. He moved through the apartment as though navigating a place he had never lived in before. Every corner felt too big. Every sound felt too loud. Every silence felt hollow. He would return from work, unlock the door, step inside, and for a split second each time, he waited for her soft humming. Her feet curled up on the chair, her tea steaming gently beside the window. But the chair remained empty, and silence deepened in the places where her voice once lived. Dot at first. He avoided the window entirely. It felt too intimate, too close to something he wasn't ready to face. Whenever the rain returned, and it always did, with its quiet persistence, he stayed in the kitchen or busied himself with tasks he didn't care about. He washed dishes that were already clean, rearranged books, wiped counters that didn't need wiping. Anything but turning toward the glass where her presence still lingered like a faint, stubborn shadow. Even from across the room he could feel the pull of the window, the way the soft lamplight fell across the armchair, the way the curtains stirred with the slightest breeze, the way the rain made its patient music. These were things that once soothed him. Now they felt like echoes he wasn't ready to hear. He remembers one particular evening, maybe a week after she left, maybe longer. Time blurred then, when the rain fell in thin streaks that looked like delicate threads. He stood by the kitchen counter, gripping a mug of untouched coffee, staring toward the window, but unable to move closer. He felt like the room was holding a breath. He didn't know how to exhale. Eventually, the coffee went cold. He poured it out. The tea corner stayed unused. The coasters gathered dust. The blanket remained folded, untouched, and undisturbed. He couldn't bring himself to sit there. Not yet. Sometimes, late at night, he would catch himself glancing toward the chair, imagining a faint glow of warmth still clinging to the cushion. But he didn't dare touch it. It felt wrong. Too soon. Too sacred. As though sitting there would be an attempt to replace a moment that wasn't his to reclaim. It wasn't grief, he felt. Not exactly. It was something quieter, heavier, a stillness that wrapped itself around his ribs and settled there like fog. Days passed. Weeks slipped by. The rain continued its rituals. Always familiar. Always faithful. Sometimes gentle, sometimes heavy, sometimes arriving without warning, but always there, tapping softly on the glass, as though reminding him that the world had not paused simply because he had. He began to notice small things. How the window fogged differently, without her breath warming the glass. How the chair no longer had its slight tilt toward him, the invisible angle she always left without thinking. How the room's shadows settled differently at night. How the quiet didn't feel peaceful anymore, just empty. One evening, he found himself standing a little closer to the window without realizing how he got there. The rain was steady, calm, almost kind. He reached out instinctively, fingertips brushing the glass. It was cool beneath his skin, too cool, like touching the memory of her rather than something real. He pulled his hand back quickly, heart tightening with an ache he didn't know how to name. Still, the window stood there, waiting, patient, unchanged. Another night, he turned on the lamp beside the chair. He didn't sit in it, not yet, but the glow filled the room with the same amber softness she loved. And for the first time since she left, the apartment didn't feel like it was holding tension in its corners. It felt gentle again, like the light remembered how to fall softly. He stood there a long time, hands in his pockets, letting the warm glow settle into him. The rain whispered on the glass. The room breathed slowly. He didn't cry. He didn't speak. He simply felt the quiet, and for once, the quiet didn't feel like an enemy. A few days later, he returned to the window once more, this time with a cup of jasmine tea. He didn't know why he brewed it. Habit, maybe, or longing, or simply because jasmine had always been the scent of softened evenings. He stood beside the chair, holding the cup but not drinking from it. The tea cooled. But he stayed. It wasn't until nearly a month later that he finally sat in the chair. It happened without planning. The rain was falling in a calm, rhythmic pattern. That reminded him of the way her breathing used to sound when she drifted off beside him. The lamp was on. The blanket was folded neatly along the armrest. Something about the night felt forgiving. He approached the chair the way one approaches an altar. Slow, quiet, reverent. When he sat, the cushion shifted beneath him, not warm, not familiar, but willing. He exhaled, long and slow, as though releasing a breath he had been holding since the night she left. For the first time, the window didn't sting. It didn't haunt. It didn't accuse Dot. It simply was just a window. Just rain. Just silence. But somehow, in that simplicity, something loosened in him. A knot he hadn't known lived behind his ribs eased slightly. The rain traced paths down the glass, gentle and steady, and he realized that the window had never been waiting for her. It had been waiting for him, to return, to breathe, to sit with the memories instead of running from them. To understand that healing doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it comes as softly as rain against a window, familiar, patient, and quietly persistent. And that night, for the first time in a long while, he let the window hold him the way it once held them both. The letter, folded by the teacup, appeared on a night when he wasn't looking for anything at all. That's how some truths arrive, not with ceremony, not with warning, but tucked quietly beneath an ordinary object, waiting for the right moment to be found. And for reasons he couldn't explain then, the rain that evening felt softer, almost guiding, as though it wanted him to notice what he had missed for so long. He had just finished washing the dishes, moving through the familiar motions in a slow, steady rhythm. It was one of those evenings when the apartment felt neither heavy nor light, simply quiet, a manageable quiet, the kind he could breathe through without feeling like it was swallowing him. The window glowed softly under the lamplight. The tea table was exactly as he had left it that morning, and the rain tapped its gentle music with calm persistence. He walked toward the chair with the intention of sitting, maybe reading a few pages of a book he wasn't really attached to. But when he reached for the teacup resting on the little wooden table, a habit he'd kept even though he rarely drank tea these days, he noticed something strange underneath it. A small corner of folded paper, barely visible, pressed under the saucer as though it had been placed there lightly, carefully, purposefully. He froze, not because he understood what it was, but because something in the room shifted. The air changed. The rain softened, hitting the glass in long, delicate strokes. As if the world outside knew a memory was about to be touched. He lifted the cup slowly. There it was, a small, neatly folded note, yellowed slightly at the edges, not aged by years, but by waiting. He recognized the handwriting immediately. Her handwriting. Soft, rounded letters, gentle loops, the faintest slant to the right like her words, always leaned towards something hopeful. His breath caught somewhere in his throat. For a long moment, he didn't pick it up. He just stood there staring, fingers hovering above it, afraid to disturb the quiet around him. He didn't know how long the letter had been there. Days? Weeks? Months? Perhaps she had placed it there on that last evening, when the rain drizzled softly and the suitcase sat waiting in the corner. Perhaps she intended for him to find it after she left, but couldn't bring herself to hand it over. Or maybe she wrote it long before that night, unsure whether it should ever be read. Eventually, with a breath that shook more than he expected, he lifted the small note and sat down slowly in her chair. Not the chair he usually chose, but hers. It felt right, necessary, even. The paper felt fragile between his fingers, delicate, like something that needed permission to be opened. He unfolded it carefully. There weren't many words. She was never someone who needed many. I hope one day you'll sit here and feel at peace. Not because I stayed, but because you learned to stay with yourself. I loved you quietly, in ways I didn't always know how to show. If I ever seemed far away, it wasn't your fault. Some parts of me have always lived behind glass. Thank you for the evenings by the window. Thank you for listening to the rain with me. Thank you for giving me a home in your quiet world. If you think of me, let it be gently. There was no signature. There didn't need to be. He read her handwriting slowly, tracing each line with his eyes, the way she once traced raindrops with her fingertips. His chest tightened, not sharply, not painfully, but with a swelling tenderness that felt like warm water rising inside him. Dot, it wasn't a goodbye letter. It wasn't an explanation. It wasn't an apology, Dot. It was a soft truth, a quiet reaching out from a place he hadn't known how to access, a kindness that came late, but not too late to matter, a final gentle breath from a connection that never learned to speak loudly. He closed his eyes, letting the words settle. She had loved him, quietly, not perfectly, not consistently, not in the way he sometimes wished she had, but genuinely, in the only way she knew how. Dot, and somehow, reading her words did not reopen wounds. It softened them, rounded their edges, let them hurt in a tender, human way instead of an aching, empty one. He read the letter again, slowly, carefully, as though afraid it might dissolve under the weight of attention. Each sentence felt like a raindrop sliding down the glass, separate, fragile, but part of something larger. Something honest. Dot, when he lowered the paper, he looked out the window, her window, and saw the reflection of the room behind him. The dim amber glow of the lamp, the curve of the chair, the faint outline of his own shoulders. And for the first time in a long time, he did not feel alone. The rain whispered across the pane, soft and steady, falling in a rhythm that felt almost familiar. He could imagine her voice layered in it, not speaking, just breathing, the way she always did when she was lost in thought. He pressed the folded letter gently between his palms. She had left words behind for him, words she hadn't spoken, words he hadn't asked for, words that didn't try to rewrite the past, only illuminate it quietly, like a candle across a darkened room. He placed the letter in the drawer beside the chair, not to hide it, but to keep it close, safe, present. Dot, then, for the first time since she left, he wrapped the blue and gray blanket around his legs, held the warm mug he brewed tonight, and leaned back in the chair that remembered her. And as the rain traced its slow journey down the window, he whispered, not to her, but to the room, to the memory, to the version of himself who once waited without knowing what for. I'll think of you gently. Outside, the rain softened, as if agreeing. Words he writes but never sends begin forming on a night when the rain feels strangely steady, not heavy, not light, but the kind that falls with purpose, as if the sky is writing something of its own. He sits at the window with her letter resting quietly in the drawer beside him, the lamp glowing with that familiar amber warmth she once loved. For a long moment, he simply listens, letting the rhythm of the rain match the slow rise and fall of his breath. The apartment feels different tonight, not lighter, not healed, just awake. Dot, as if something in the room has gently stirred after a long sleep. A curtain shifting in a breeze, a small weight lifting from a shelf, a quiet space opening where something used to be held tightly. He reaches for a notebook he hasn't touched in months. Its pages still smell faintly of jasmine, or maybe that's memory playing tricks on him. He holds a pen loosely, almost cautiously, as though unsure whether the words inside him are ready to be written. But the moment he uncaps the pen, something settles. A soft click, not loud, not dramatic, but final, like the closing of a small latch inside him. He places the tip of the pen on the paper. At first, nothing comes, not because he has nothing to say, but because he has too much. A tangle of thoughts, half-felt memories, quiet regrets, warm moments, sentences that once lived in silence. He doesn't know how to begin. He doesn't know which part of the truth to touch first. But the rain helps him, the way it always has. Steady, gentle, persistent. Few minutes pass before he finally writes the first line. I don't know if these words are for you or for me. He stares at the sentence, feeling something ease inside his chest. So he keeps going, letting the pen move across the page in slow, unhurried strokes. The letter doesn't look like her letter. Hers was neat, delicate, careful. His is slower, heavier. But on a dot, he writes about the window first, because it feels like the safest place to begin. I sit where you used to sit. Sometimes it feels like you're still here. Not as a shadow, not as a ghost. Just a softness that hasn't learned how to leave. He pauses, listening to the whisper of rain on glass. It's the same sound he used to hear when she leaned her head on her knees, humming absent-mindedly. Next, he writes about the evenings, those early ones when everything felt new and fragile, like the world was unfolding quietly just for them. You taught me how to slow down, how to listen, how to let silence be warm instead of frightening. He hadn't realized then how rare that gift was. The comfort of sharing quiet with someone who understood it. Then come the harder lines. He writes about the small distances that grew between them, the hesitations, the unspoken needs, the way he missed signals, not because he didn't care, but because he didn't know how to see them. You drifted, and I didn't reach fast enough. Not because I didn't want to, because I didn't know how. And by the time I tried to understand, your silence had already learned the shape of leaving. His hand trembles slightly as he writes these words. Not in sorrow, in recognition. In clarity, he takes a breath, watches a droplet slide slowly down the window, merge with another, and fall. Then he writes about her letter. I found your words. Thank you for writing them. Thank you for leaving a piece of yourself behind that didn't sting, for loving me quietly, for teaching me to think gently. His handwriting softens as he continues, as if guided by something other than thought, something older, deeper, living in the quiet spaces of memory. I'm learning to stay, not just with the chair, not just with the rain, but with myself. It feels strange to admit, stranger still to write, because staying with himself is something he never truly knew how to do. Not when she was with him, not after she left, but tonight, with the rain steady and honest and patient. He feels it, the beginning of something still, the slow unwinding of tightly held things. He pauses, listening to the steady hum of the rain. It feels like breath, like time, like permission. The next words emerge gently. If you ever think of me, I hope it's not with regret. If I think of you, and I will, I hope it will always be softly. He doesn't write about wanting her back. He doesn't write about what could have been. He doesn't write promises or pleas or fantasies of second chances. What he writes instead is truth, a soft truth, like hers. Some people pass through our lives like rain, soft, temporary, but they leave everything greener. His pen stops. He reads the letter from beginning to end out. It doesn't feel like closure. It doesn't feel like goodbye. It feels like sitting beside a window with the rain whispering its patient music, allowing something unresolved to breathe. He folds the letter slowly, not neatly, not like hers, but with care. He slips it into the same drawer where her letter rests. The two pieces of paper lie there together, not answering each other exactly, but sharing the same small, quiet space. He leans back in the chair, pulling the blanket over his legs, holding his warm tea close. Outside, the rain continues dark and inside. For the first time in a long while, he feels something steady growing. Not joy, not sorrow, but a kind of understanding. Some words aren't meant to be sent. They're meant to be written, to lighten the heart, to soften the past, to remind us who we were and who we're becoming. Tonight, he lets the rain carry those words gently into the quiet. Talking to her as if she stayed begins almost by accident, not as a ritual, not as a longing, but as a quiet response to a night when the rain is particularly tender. Some evenings, the rain arrives harshly, tapping sharp rhythms against the glass. But tonight, it falls in soft, unhurried breaths, like someone humming in another room. The sound is familiar enough to loosen something inside him, gentle enough to make the walls of the apartment feel a little less empty. He sits in her chair with the blanket draped lightly over his legs, the lamp casting its amber glow across the room. The window stretches before him like a calm, waiting face. The letter he wrote, the one he'll never send, rests quietly in the drawer beside her letter. The two folded pages lying together like the remnants of a conversation that almost happened. He takes a sip of warm jasmine tea, and without meaning to, he speaks. "I never told you how much I liked your stories." The words slip out so softly, he almost wonders if he imagined them. His voice feels different from how it once sounded, lower, steadier, not heavy with grief, just quiet, thoughtful. He clears his throat, startled at himself. He hadn't planned to start speaking to an empty chair, but the rain seems to invite honesty. And the window, the place that held so many shared evenings, feels like a safe listener. He tries again, this time more intentionally. "You made the rain feel alive for me," he murmurs, eyes tracing the slow journey of a droplet trailing down the glass. "Before you, I never paid attention to any of this. Weather was just weather. Noise was just noise. Silence was something to fill. But you," he pauses, swallowing gently, "you taught me what quietness could be." The rain answers with its soft tapping, the city below glowing in muted colors. He imagines her sitting in her usual posture, knees drawn up, mug held gently, eyes half dreaming. He doesn't see her clearly. He doesn't pretend she's still here. But the memory of her presence makes the space feel warmer, easier to breathe in. He leans back slightly, letting the chair hold him the way it once held her. Sometimes, memory isn't an image, it's a posture, a scent, a softness in the air. "I think I understand you better now," he says quietly. "Or maybe I'm finally listening in the way I should have back then." He feels no sting saying this, only a slow settling, like dust drifting down in a sunbeam dot. He talks about small things at first, the way the streetlight flickers on rainy nights, the new plant he placed on the windowsill, the neighbor who got a new dog, the book he's trying to finish. They're the kind of details she used to love, small, quiet pieces of life that others overlook. And as he speaks them aloud, he realizes he's not talking to her ghost. He's talking to the memory of being understood. There is something healing in that difference dot at one point. He laughs softly, shaking his head. "I tried naming the rain again," he admits, "but I don't think I'm very good at it. You always had a better imagination." He imagines the little smile she would have given him. Not bright, not loud, but soft and approving. The kind that warmed the room more than any lamp could. The rain shifts slightly, becoming gentler, like a hand brushing dust from a windowsill. "I'm sorry," he whispers, not for a specific moment, not for a mistake, but for all the things he didn't know how to voice. The moments when silence grew heavier than it should have. The times he didn't reach before she drifted too far. "I didn't understand how to love in the quiet," he says. "I thought being near was enough. I thought listening without speaking meant I was doing the right thing. But sometimes you needed more than stillness. You needed presence." He lets the words settle into the dim room. Her absence doesn't hurt like it once did. The ache has softened, turned into something more, like gratitude wrapped in longing. The kind of feeling that makes you close your eyes. Not because it hurts, but because it holds something you want to savor. His voice grows even softer. "I hope you found someone to listen to your rain names," he murmurs. Someone who understands that silence can be a conversation too. He doesn't mean it as a wish to be replaced. He means it as a wish for her happiness. A genuine one. The rain deepens outside, tapping in a slow, even tempo, steady as breath. Steady as time. At some point, he stops talking and simply sits, listening to the sound of the world breathing through the thin glass. His shoulders loosen, his jaw unclenches. He feels rested. As though speaking aloud has opened a small window inside him, letting old air drift out and new air drift in. He thinks of her letter, "If you think of me, let it be gently," and of his own reply, "If I think of you and I hope it will always be softly." He breathes in. He breathes out. For the first time, he feels he is honoring both. He doesn't know how long he sits there. Minutes, maybe an hour, but when he finally rises to make fresh tea, the apartment feels subtly different. Not fuller, not brighter, just peaceful. Like something inside him has settled into place. Like talking to her memory helped him talk to himself. Like the window, the rain, the chair, and the quiet have all softened their edges, making room for the next chapters of his life to grow gently, naturally, in their own time. He pours jasmine tea carefully, watching the steam rise. "Thank you," he whispers, not to the past, not to the present, but to the quiet moment holding him tenderly between both. Outside, the rain continues, soft and steady, as if agreeing that healing, like falling water, is something that happens drop by drop. Learning to breathe with the rain does not happen in a single night. It unfolds slowly, like the soft unfurling of a leaf after a long winter. Somewhere along the way, gently, almost imperceptibly, the rhythms outside his window begin to echo the rhythms inside his chest, and he finds himself matching them without effort, without thought, as if the rain has become a quiet teacher, showing him how to exist again, softly. Tonight, the rain arrives early, a thin, misty drizzle at first, then a steadier whisper against the glass. He sits in the chair with his feet tucked under the blanket, and for once, he isn't thinking about the past. He isn't chasing memories or asking questions or trying to fill the spaces where she once sat. He's just breathing. In. The rain falls. Out. The rain spreads across the window pane. In. A droplet gathers. Out. It slides down gently. For the first time in months, his breath feels steady, not caught in his throat, not tight beneath his ribs, not weighed down by unspoken words. Just steady. He doesn't notice right away that his hand has stopped gripping the blanket, or that his shoulders, for the first time in a long while, rest comfortably against the back of the chair, or that his mind, usually filled with restless thoughts, feels strangely spacious, like a room aired out after a long, still season. The rain softens further, turning into the quiet kind she used to call half-asleep rain. The kind that makes the city sound small and safe. The kind that makes the world feel like it's whispering a lullaby. He closes his eyes. He's not imagining her beside him, not summoning her memory, not recreating old scenes. He's simply listening, and in the gentle hum of water touching glass, he feels something loosen an old knot, a long-held ache, a quiet tension he didn't know how to release. It unravels slowly, delicately, like thread slipping free from cloth. When he exhales, the air leaving his chest feels warm, softer than before, almost peaceful. It surprises him, this softness. It doesn't feel like forgetting her. It doesn't feel like moving on abruptly. It feels like learning to sit with the memory without being pulled under by it. He opens his eyes again and watches the world outside. The street below glimmers under the hazy street lamps. A lone umbrella moves slowly along the sidewalk, the person beneath it walking without hurry. A cat darts across the wet pavement, pauses to shake its paws, then disappears behind a parked car. Everything seems slower tonight, not dragging, not heavy, just unrushed, as though the rain is reminding the world that nothing needs to move quickly to be real. He touches the glass lightly with his fingertips. It's cool, grounding. He used to watch her do this, tracing invisible patterns on the window, as if leaving small blessings behind. He tries it now, not to mimic her, but to feel the rain more closely. His fingertips fog the glass slightly, and he smiles softly at the small warmth he leaves behind. He takes another breath. In, out, rhythm, steady. Gentle Dot, there was a time when breathing hurt, when each inhale felt like dragging a heavy weight into his chest, when each exhale felt like losing something he hadn't learned to hold. But tonight, the breath feels like a companion. The rain feels like a guide. He thinks of her letter of the line that lingers with him more than all the others. I hope one day he'll sit here and feel at peace. He's not fully there yet, but he's closer. Closer than he's ever been. The thought doesn't ache this time. It warms. He looks at the steaming cup beside him, jasmine tea, just like always. He didn't brew it because of her. He brewed it because tonight the scent felt right, felt gentle, felt like something that belonged to the moment rather than the memory. He sips it slowly. The warmth travels down his throat, settling deep in his chest. It feels grounding, like he is filling himself with something soft and kind. He realizes, with a quiet understanding, that healing is not a moment. It is not a decision. It is not a chapter closing. Healing is this, sitting by the same window, with the same rain, in the same chair, but feeling your breath return to you in a way that does not hurt God. He leans his head back, eyes half-lidded, listening as the rain changes pace, a soft, calming whisper, like a lullaby written by the sky. He breathes in again, slow, deep, unforced. For the first time, he isn't trying to match the rain. He simply is. The window, the rain, the lamp, the blanket, all the things that once held the weight of memory now feel like companions, not reminders. The room is no longer a place he avoids or tiptoes through. It is a place where breath comes easily, where his heart feels a little less guarded. He watches another droplet slide down the pane, merging with another. Then another, their path soft, inevitable, unhurried. Thank you, he whispers, not to her, not to the past, but to the moment. Because tonight, for the first time, he feels something settle in him. A rhythm, a softness, a breath that belongs wholly to him. And the rain, steady and kind, continues falling as if acknowledging his quiet return to himself. Small new rituals beside the window begin almost without intention, the way new roots find soil, the way morning light finds a crack in a curtain. Nothing dramatic, nothing planned, just gentle shifts, small acts that slowly reshape the space without erasing what came before. He doesn't force them. He doesn't chase them. They simply appear, the way soft habits do, arriving quietly and settling into the corners of his life with patient ease. It begins with a plant. One afternoon, while passing a tiny shop on a side street, he pauses in front of a row of potted greens arranged beneath a dripping awning. Something about their simplicity draws him in, the humble shapes, the soft leaves catching raindrops, the gentle presence of life in a place most people walk past without noticing. She would have stopped for them, he thinks. She would have crouched down, touched the leaves, whispered something like, "Plants listen better in the rain," without fully understanding why. He buys a small pothos, its vines short but eager, its leaves glossy from the lingering drizzle. He brings it home and places it on the windowsill beside the chair. Not in her exact spot, not to replace anything, just to add something living to the room. The plant doesn't fill the space she left behind. It doesn't try, but it makes the window feel a little warmer, a little more awake. He waters it in the mornings now, watching how the leaves turn toward the light. Sometimes he speaks to it softly, not because he expects a response, but because the act of speaking gently has become part of his healing. Then comes the lamp. One evening, he notices the old lampshade is beginning to fray. The threads hang loose along the bottom edge, soft and warm. He remembers how she loved this lamp, how she said its light felt like kindness made visible. So instead of replacing the lamp entirely, he finds a new shade with warm amber fabric. It casts a glow similar to the one she loved, but slightly different, deeper, richer, a little more grounded. When he turns it on for the first time, the room changes subtly. The light feels fuller, more comforting. More his. The next ritual arrives through sound. For months, he avoided music in the evenings. Music carried too many memories, too many echoes of the soft tunes she hummed without thinking. But one night, he opens an old drawer and finds a tiny speaker he bought years ago. He places it on the table beside the chair. He scrolls through playlists, and eventually, he chooses something simple, soft piano notes, slow and spaced out, like someone thinking aloud. When the melody begins, it doesn't clash with the rain. It folds into it. The piano becomes a companion to the water, not a distraction. And without meaning to, he breathes more deeply. He begins brewing different teas too, not just jasmine. Some nights it's chamomile. Other nights it's peppermint or ginger, or a blend he can't pronounce. He experiments with flavors the way she once experimented with stories, curious, unhurried, open. He discovers that he enjoys the scent of chamomile drifting through the room, its warmth settling into the walls, into his hands, into his chest. Tea becomes a ritual again, not a memory of her habits, but an exploration of his own. Another ritual grows from something quieter, writing. After the letter he wrote and tucked away, he begins opening his notebook more often. Not to write long confessions or emotional revelations, just small things. A sentence about the weather, a thought he doesn't want to forget, a line he heard in a cafe that made him pause, a fragment of dream, a description of the way the rain looked at dusk. He writes these things like gathering pebbles from a river, small, smooth, quietly meaningful. Eventually, he names the notebook, Window Journal. Some entries mention her. Most don't, but every entry feels like a moment of grounding. There are rituals of movement too. Some nights, he shifts the chair slightly, just a few inches, to see the rain from a slightly different angle. He finds that the world changes with the smallest adjustment. The streetlight arcs differently. The shadows stretch longer. The droplets catch more silver. It makes the window feel new, not frozen in memory. Other nights, he sits cross-legged, or with his feet on the floor, or leaning against the armrest. He occupies the space in ways he never allowed himself to before, ways that make the chair feel less like hers and more like a shared legacy. Then comes a ritual he never expected. He smiles more. Not wide, not bright, not in bursts, but soft. Subtle smiles that come when a certain droplet zigzags down the glass, or when the plant unfurls a new leaf, or when he warms his hands on a cup and feels the simple comfort of it spread through him. These smiles aren't about forgetting her. They're about remembering himself. And the rain, always the rain, becomes less a backdrop and more a companion. He begins to recognize the different moods of it again. The hesitant drizzle, the confident downpour, the playful patter, the solemn, steady curtain. He finds names for them, not the poetic ones she used, but his own. He calls the soft morning rain thinking rain. The heavy evening storms become truth rain. The slow, steady falls just past midnight, breathing rain. These rituals, small and unremarkable to others, feel monumental to him, because each one is a step forward, a gentle claiming of the window, not as a shrine of the past, but as a space for the future. The more rituals he creates, the less lonely the room becomes. Not because he's filling emptiness, but because he's learning how to be present within it. And as he watches the rain glide down the glass, reflecting the warm amber light of the new lampshade. He realizes something tender and profound. Healing doesn't erase what was. It adds to it, layer by layer, soft moment by soft moment, like rain collecting into puddles that shimmer beneath streetlights. He sits back in the chair, plant at his side, tea in hand, music low, careworn. Not replacing anything, not forgetting anything, not just being, just breathing, just living in a room that has learned to hold both memory and possibility. And in that quiet, he feels the truth settle gently. He is starting to belong here again. What the window teaches about letting go arrives not as a sudden realization, not as an epiphany carved in lightning, but as a slow understanding, the kind that gathers quietly over many evenings, many breaths, many rains. It comes to him gently, the way dawn softens the edges of night, first as a feeling, then a thought, then a truth he can finally hold without trembling. Tonight, the rain is calm. Not too light, not too heavy. A middle-place rain, the kind that seems to fall with awareness, as though pacing itself so the world can listen. He sits in the chair with the blanket over his knees, a mug of chamomile warming his palms, and the window glowing softly before him. The plant on the sill has grown 2 new leaves. The notebook lies open, but unwritten on the table. The speaker in the corner plays a distant piano, sparse, gentle notes that drift like small lanterns across the room. He breathes in, he breathes out, and feels the subtle, quiet truth he has been circling for months finally rise to the surface. The window has always been about Season's dot in the beginning. It was a place of connection, where she sat, where they shared tea, where the rain softened the boundaries between their hearts. Later, it became a place of silence, of distance, of the ache that grew between them. After she left, it became a place he avoided, too heavy, too alive with the echoes of what used to be. Then, slowly, it became the place where he learned to return to himself. Tonight, the window feels like something else entirely. Not a memory, not a shrine, not a wound, not even a comfort dot. It feels like a teacher. He watches a droplet begin at the top of the glass, trembling slightly, gathering itself before falling. It hesitates, slides, merges with another droplet, changes path, continues, until finally, inevitably, it reaches the bottom of the pain dot. He follows it with his eyes, and something quiet inside him aligns. Every drop begins somewhere. Every drop ends somewhere. But in between, there is movement, soft, unpredictable movement that cannot be forced or held. He remembers how she once said that rainy windows hold stories. Back then, he thought she meant the raindrops themselves. Now he understands she meant everything reflected in them. He shifts slightly in the chair and lets the realization settle. Letting go isn't releasing all memory, or forcing nothing to matter, or pretending that absence is painless. Letting go is allowing movement. Letting go is letting truth breathe. Letting go is recognizing that some things are meant to pass through us the way storms pass through a night, leaving the air different, clearer, even if touched by a little sadness. He rests his hand gently on the WINDOWSILL dot for a long time. He thought holding on meant staying loyal to what they were, loyal to the soft beginnings, loyal to the quiet warmth she brought into his life. He thought letting go would mean erasure or betrayal, or losing something essential. But the window, in its simple wisdom, shows him otherwise. Holding on too tightly leads to fogged glass, a view blurred, indistinct, unreachable. Letting go means wiping the pain gently and seeing the world again, steady and clear. He looks out now, seeing the streetlights shimmer across wet pavement. Cars move slowly through the drizzle. A couple walks under a shared umbrella, heads tilted toward each other. A man in a yellow raincoat pauses by a puddle, watching the ripples settle. The world beyond the window is alive, quietly alive, and he feels himself part of it again. The rain continues. Its rhythm. He speaks softly, not to her memory, but to the moment itself. I don't want to hold you as something lost. I want to hold you as something that lived. There is no tremor in his voice, no breaking, only clarity, only warmth. He thinks of the letter she left, the one asking him to remember her gently. He thinks of his own letter, the one promising he would. And he realizes, remembering gently is a form of letting go. It is letting the memory breathe instead of locking it away, letting it soften instead of sharpen, letting it exist without demanding anything in return. The rain shifts tempo, a soft tapping like fingertips on glass, the rhythm she loved most. He smiles, not with longing, not with ache, with gratitude. For what was, for what wasn't, for what taught him, for what changed him. He takes another sip of tea, warmth spreading through him like a slow, kind dawn. He understands now that windows are frames, not cages. They hold what we see, what we remember, what we dream, but they do not trap it. They let the world move, shift, pass. They let the rain fall freely without trying to keep it. They let light in. They let breath in. They let time in. Letting go, he realizes, is not closing the window. It is opening it in the mind, in the heart, and allowing movement to return. He rests deeper into the chair, watching raindrops collide and merge, forming new paths. Those paths remind him that life continues, always changing shape, always finding new ways to fall and land and start again. A gentle calm settles into him. The window is no longer a place where he waits for someone who left. It is no longer a place he fears or avoids. It is no longer a place defined by absence. It is simply a window, a companion in quiet evenings, a reminder of softness, a teacher of movement, a witness of change. He closes his eyes briefly, letting the rain's rhythm blur into his breathing. Letting go does not erase love. It transforms it into something spacious, kind, patient. A memory held lightly. A truth carried without weight. When he opens his eyes again, he feels something like peace settle over him. Fragile but real, like the shimmer of rain on glass. And he whispers to no one and to everything, I'm learning. Outside, the rain continues steady, gentle, and unmistakably alive. Resting at last as the rain softens feels like the quiet closing of a long, tender chapter, not with a loud ending, not with a dramatic revelation, but with a sense of gentle arrival, like stepping into a room warmed by candlelight, like slipping under a soft blanket at the end of a long day, like exhaling a breath that has been waiting, patient and steady, for months. Tonight, the rain comes later than usual, not rushing, not pouring, just easing into the night with a slow, delicate rhythm, the kind that sounds like a lullaby written on glass. He sits in the chair by the window, her chair once, then their chair, then an empty space, then a place of healing, and now simply a chair he loves, a chair that has learned to hold him without feeling like it belongs to a ghost. The lamp glows in its warm amber way, softening the room's edges. The plant on the windowsill glistens with tiny droplets he spritzed earlier. The blanket rests easily around his legs. The air smells faintly of chamomile and rain. He breathes in slow, steady. He breathes out softer than he ever has. And for the first time, he feels completely present. Not pulled backward, not leaning forward. Just here. Just now. The rain taps lightly at the window. A familiar voice, a steady companion. Once, this sound carried memories that weighed heavy inside him. Tonight, it carries something else entirely. Calm, balance, a sense of being gently held. He watches a few cars pass on the wet street below, their lights stretching into soft lines on the pavement. A woman with an umbrella hurries across the road, trying not to step into puddles. Somewhere down the block, a small window glows blue from a television. Life moves slowly, unhurried, like the world has chosen to breathe with him. He lets his head rest against the back of the chair. Eyes half-dash closed dot, it strikes him, quietly, almost shyly, that the apartment doesn't feel empty anymore. It doesn't echo with absence. It doesn't carry the sharp outlines of what used to be. Instead, it feels full of gentle things, small rituals, steady breaths, soft moments, and the subtle warmth of someone who has returned to himself. He touches the armrest lightly. He remembers her the way she once curled into this chair, the way she held her tea with both hands, the way she listened to the rain as if it carried messages only she could hear. But the memory no longer wraps itself in ache. It simply exists, warm, honest, quiet, like a lantern in a far-off window. Distant, steady, comforting dot he whispers into the dim light. I'm okay. It's not a declaration, not a triumph, just a truth that has taken its time to grow. A truth the rain has helped him shape. He thinks of the letters hers and is resting in the drawer. They no longer feel like unfinished conversations. They feel like resting places for words that needed somewhere to land. He doesn't need to open them tonight. He knows what they say. He knows what they mean. And that is enough dot. The rain softens further, becoming almost indistinguishable from breath. A quiet harmony fills the room, the hush of water, the low hum of the lamp, the soft rhythm of his heartbeat. Time feels slower here, wider, safe. He watches a droplet slide down the window, its path steady, peaceful. It gathers other droplets along the way, and he smiles softly, because he understands now that life is much like this. A slow collection of moments, a merging of small truths, a gentle falling into new paths. He closes his eyes completely. Rest doesn't come as sleep, not right away. It comes as a settling, a loosening, a warmth that begins in the chest and spreads outward, filling his limbs, softening the tension in his shoulders, smoothing the lines of his breath. He feels the room cradle him, the chair beneath him, the blanket over him, the window beside him, the rain around him. He realizes, with a tenderness that brings no tears, that he has not lost her. He has simply carried her into a place where she no longer hurts, where she no longer lingers as a question, a regret, a weight dot. She exists in his quiet now, in the way he listens, in the way he slows down, in the way he names the rain, in the way he honors gentle things. She is not gone. She is transformed. And so is he dot when he opens his eyes again. The window glows with a soft reflection of the room behind him, the amber lamp, the plant, the blanket, the steady, quiet life he has rebuilt. The past is in the glass. The present is in his breath. The future is in the steady pulse of rain. He leans back fully, allowing himself to rest, not as a man waiting for someone, not as someone grieving, not as someone recovering, but simply as a person at peace in a room that has learned to hold him gently. The rain continues its soft, whispering fall. He closes his eyes, and the final thought that drifts through him is not about her leaving, or their silence, or the ache of old nights dot. It is simple. The window is home dot, and tonight, so is he.